The political spotlight turned sharply, and unexpectedly, when Donald Trump weighed in on a controversial and deeply personal report involving Kristi Noem and her husband, Brian Noem. What began as a shocking allegation quickly spiraled into a media firestorm, raising questions about privacy, political optics, and the unpredictable ways personal lives intersect with public power. The report that ignited the storm. The controversy centers around claims that Brian Noem allegedly maintained a hidden online presence involving cross-dressing and participation in fetish-based communities. According to reports, this activity spanned years and included the use of pseudonyms, sharing explicit photos and messages, spending upwards of $25,000 on interactions across niche platforms. While none of these behaviors are illegal on their own, the secrecy, financial scale, and explicit nature of the alleged activity pushed the story into the national spotlight, especially given Kristi Noem's high-profile political standing. The situation immediately drew attention not just because of its sensational details, but because it touched on deeper concerns: honesty, vulnerability, and whether private behavior can have public consequences when connected to political figures. Donald Trump's reaction. Few words, big impact. When asked about the situation, Donald Trump responded in a way that was both brief and telling. He reportedly said, "That's too bad. I feel badly for the family." At the same time, Trump made it clear he had no prior knowledge of the allegations, adding that he hadn't seen the reports in detail. This reaction is notable for what it didn't include. No direct criticism, no strong defense, no political attack. Instead, Trump struck a tone of distance mixed with sympathy, an approach that allowed him to acknowledge the story without becoming entangled in it. Kristi Noem, a political figure under pressure. For Kristi Noem, this controversy lands at a particularly sensitive moment. Once considered a rising force within Republican politics and a close ally of Trump, she has faced increasing scrutiny in recent months. Her public image has already been tested by leadership controversies, internal political tensions, questions about decision-making in office. Now, this deeply personal situation adds a new and unpredictable dimension to her public narrative. What makes this especially challenging is that the controversy does not stem from her own actions, but from those of someone closely tied to her. In politics, however, proximity often matters as much as direct responsibility. A personal crisis in the public eye. According to statements attributed to her camp, Kristi Noem was blindsided by the allegations and deeply affected by their emergence. Behind the headlines lies a real family dynamic. A long-term marriage, shared children, a life built far outside the glare of such scrutiny. The emotional weight of the situation cannot be ignored. What the public sees as a scandal is, at its core, a personal crisis unfolding under intense media pressure. Privacy versus public interest. One of the biggest debates sparked by this story is where to draw the line between private life and public accountability. On one hand, individuals, even spouses of politicians, have a right to personal privacy. Consensual adult behavior is not inherently a public concern. On the other hand, secrecy can raise questions about vulnerability. Financial activity tied to hidden identities can attract scrutiny. Connections to high-ranking officials elevate the stakes. This tension is not new, but cases like this bring it into sharp focus. Potential security concerns. Some analysts have pointed out that situations involving secret online identities and significant financial transactions could, in theory, create risks. The concern is not about the behavior itself, but about exposure. Hidden activities can be leveraged by bad actors. Financial trails can be traced and exploited. Public figures and their families are frequent targets for manipulation. While there is no confirmed evidence of wrongdoing beyond the allegations themselves, the mere possibility of vulnerability is enough to raise eyebrows in political and security circles. Media frenzy and public reaction. The reaction to the story has been swift and intense, with responses falling into several categories. Shock and fascination. The unusual nature of the allegations captured widespread attention. Political narratives. Supporters and critics alike have used the story to reinforce their existing views. Sympathy. Some voices have emphasized compassion, pointing out that this is ultimately a family matter. Criticism of media exposure. Others have questioned whether such deeply personal details should have been reported at all. Trump's strategy. Distance without disloyalty. Donald Trump's response reflects a familiar balancing act. By expressing sympathy while avoiding specifics, he managed to show human concern, avoid political fallout, maintain flexibility moving forward. This approach allows him to remain connected to Kristi Noem without being pulled into a potentially damaging controversy. It's a calculated response, one that keeps options open while minimizing risk. The broader political impact. The long-term effects of this controversy remain uncertain, but several possibilities stand out. Reputation challenges. Even indirect scandals can shape public perception. Shifts in political alliances. Situations like this can quietly influence relationships behind the scenes. Media persistence. Stories with unusual or sensational elements tend to linger. Public empathy factor. Depending on how the situation unfolds, Kristi Noem could receive support as someone dealing with a personal hardship. The human element behind the headlines. It's easy to get lost in the sensational aspects of a story like this. But at its core, it involves a marriage under strain, a family navigating unexpected exposure, individuals dealing with intense public scrutiny. Politics often strips away humanity, reducing people to headlines and talking points. This situation is a reminder that behind every controversy are real lives being affected. Final thoughts. The reaction from Donald Trump, simple, restrained, and sympathetic, may seem minor at first glance. But it reflects a larger reality about how modern political figures navigate controversy. This story sits at the intersection of personal privacy, public responsibility, media influence, political strategy, and while the headlines may eventually fade, the questions it raises will remain. How much of a public figure's private world should be exposed? When does personal behavior become a public issue? And how do leaders respond when allies are caught in deeply personal storms? For now, one thing is clear: what started as a shocking report has evolved into a complex narrative, one that goes far beyond politics and into the deeply human terrain of trust, identity, and resilience.